Hey, um, Aiden here. Um, I'm mixing it up with this video. Figured I'd do something that isn't music related at all. Um, One thing I'm also very passionate about besides music and that kind of thing is I'm very interested in film and I'm very interested in animation. So over the past few months, I watched every single um, animated short film to win the Academy Award, the Oscar for Best Animated Short Film. And now I'm going to give you my top 10 favorites. So you should watch some of these, though. At least all of the ones on my list. There are a few I didn't like at all that won, but none of these. Okay, number 10, I have. Um, it's called a Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass double feature. It's directed by John and Faith Hubley, and I believe it was released in 1966. The animation on this one is really good, and the music. I love the music, and they do, and it's like proto music videos, you could say, but with this very original animation and kind of abstract style, which I like. And the only reason it's down at 10 is just because it doesn't have the same kind of strength in terms of like a plot that the others do. But I think in terms of animation, it's definitely top notch and it looks great. And it matches and they tell small stories, in between that are kind of like darkly comedic or something like that. But yeah, so it's a number 10 because I didn't think it was as deep as some of the other ones, but I think the craftsmanship is about on par. And now my number 9 is from 1940. It's called The Milky Way, and I believe it was directed by Rudolph Ising, although I might be wrong. In this film, it's about three cats who travel to the Milky Way. And I love how retro it is. It's a very obviously it's from 1940, but it's extremely old school. It's extremely kind of they have this kind of very classic vocal group, singing in the background that has like this theme song, and it sounds so good, but it sounds very of another time, which I like about that. And it's such lush and beautiful animation that I had to put it up. That it tackles something. There's a lot of these early shorts, a lot of old like Disney and MGM cartoons that had very lush, expressive animation. This one just edged out some of the other ones because it applied this animation to a story that is more unique. It gave them an opportunity to do outer space and this kind of abstract fantasy world with that style of animation, and I really love that. Um, and my number 8 is from 1970. It's called Is It Always Right to Be Right? And the reason it's where it is, I love the animation style. A lot of the ones from the 60s and 70s have this very rebellious animation style where it's very much against the kind of old school Disney realistic style. And that was pioneered by UPA and other people, and they'll be later on this list. But Is It Always Right to Be Right? It feels somewhat dated, I think. It's very much like a product of the late 60s, early 70s type of like hippie mentality, I think. But I think it's very good nonetheless. I think the the message is simple, but it's delivered in a very kind of strong and compelling way that I like. And it's very kind of it feels alive. Like the animation feels like it's moving. It's not perfect. It's very kind of it's lively though. That's the right word. And I think it's a great film. My number 7 is a film from Disney. I think it's from 1937. It's called The Old Mill, and it's interesting technologically because it was the first to use a multiplane camera. So it essentially combined sets into an animated film by photographing these sets and then incorporating animated characters into it. And it's there's no dialogue. It's unique in that it's a story told through entirely animals, but not that kind of anthropomorphic animals that you see in a lot of them. it's very much more so a kind of realistic storytelling, and it's very tense, very feels very real, and it has a kind of darkness to it that I like. It's not, the typical Disney where it's very sanitized and light. So I like it a lot. My number six is, I think, from 1952. It's called Gerald McBoing Boing. It was written by Dr. Seuss, and it's pretty notable historically in that it was the first major cartoon that was a success that didn't adhere to the traditional animation rules. The characters were designed to look two dimensional. They weren't designed to look realistic and like fully fleshed animation models. It was much more stylized, much less grounded, and much more experimental in its style. The angles were also harsher too. There were a lot of Dutch angles and kind of fast cutting and that kind of thing, which is very cool. Um, and I mostly have it here for those reasons. I think the story's fine. I mean, I don't think it's amazing story wise. I think Dr. Seuss has probably written a lot better stories, but I think the animation, the way the story is told, is very, very expressive, very moving, which I like. And this one was directed by John Hubley. Um, Monroe is my number five. I think it was 1960. And the basic story of this is it's another one of these kind of experimental shorts where it was written by Jules Feiffer, I believe, and directed by Gene Deitch. Um, and the basic story is that like a young child is drafted into the army, and he's like 4, and he reminds everyone, I'm only 4 years old, but no one believes him, and it's this kind of satire on bureaucracy and that kind of thing, which I like. And I think it's a well told story. It's very kind of satirical. It's kind of dry humor, I would say. Not exactly the kind of one theme in my list is there's a lot of kind of traditional cartoons that won. Like I would say like the Looney Tunes and Tom and Jerry. I like a lot of those, but all my winners are very experimental, or at the very least very different from what you could get in most cartoons. And that was kind of what separated them from the rest of the pack for me, that they felt like experiences I couldn't get elsewhere. Um, so that's Monroe. And number four is 1987, directed by Frederick Bach. It's called The Man Who Planted Trees. And this is probably, in terms of animation, might be the best or second best, top two on the list. Um, it's so beautifully animated. It's basically animated like a painting throughout. It's like all these fluid brush strokes. It's not line animation. It's not cell animation. That kind of thing. It's very expressive. It's very kind of new looking. Um, it's the most recent one on my list. But it's I think the only reason I have three others above. I think this one's a little long. I think it needed that length, but I think it also, suffers in some ways because of it. But because I think often a kind of simplicity accompanying these kind of stories can help them feel very universal. This feels universal. I just think there are three more that are better. It's still a 10 out of 10. The top nine of these are all 10 out of 10. Um, and then my number three is a television adaptation of A Christmas Carol from 1971. It's only 25 minutes, which isn't that long, but it fits in the entire novel fairly decently. And the main reason it's here is because the animation it's beautiful. It is so amazing to look at. It is so expressive. It is so well done, and um, it's so fitting for the story. It's extremely when the two children, Ignorance and Want, appear. It's very disturbing almost. Um, and each of the ghosts, they're animated so well. And this, would be probably my favorite adaptation of A Christmas Carol. Period. If it was a little longer, I think it's my second favorite as of right now, behind the Alistair Sim 1951. Um, but it's a great cartoon, and um, it's definitely a strong three. My number two is Moonbird. It's directed by John and Faith Hubley, and kind of it's experimental in that they were a couple and they recorded their children kind of just making up this story about a moonbird, or like a fake bird, a mythical kind of legendary, imaginary animal. Um, and then they paired it with just the most gorgeous animation. I know I say that about all of these, but it's truly jaw dropping. I think people don't appreciate enough, like in the era of modern day 3D CGI animation, which I really don't like at all, how beautiful a lot of old school 2D hand drawn animation was. It's so, this short especially, it's so gorgeous. It has this kind of blue and purple cool tint throughout. I think it's amazing looking, and I think the way it's paired with the audio, which was just recorded from their kids, it makes it very personal, and it makes a very great film. I think it's just perfect. Yeah, I mean, it's some of these. The top two are probably in my 100 favorite films, period, of all time. Animated, short, feature, live action, just anything. Um, and then before I do my one, I want to do some honorable mentions. The Pink Think. It's a Pink Panther cartoon. I really like the kind of style they're going for. I like how it's a very simple storyline, and I like how they're very creative with the gags they tell. I think that's cool. Um, Another really good one that I liked was called Flowers and Trees. It was the first winner back in 1932, and I thought it was, again, just the animation was so ornate. It was so rich and luscious. It was the first, I believe it was the first color film in America in when it came out in 1932, which, with all the black and white and that kind of thing, it must have been incredible to see something that looked so alive and so green and so blue and so rich in every way. But yeah, those are two like strong honorable mentions for me. Um, Flowers and Trees is probably number 11 if this was a top 11, but it's not. And then my number one is another short by John and Faith Hubley. I know I've already done two by them, but I don't care. Their shorts are easily the best, in my opinion, on this whole list. It's called The Hole, and it's from 1962. It is amazing, just front to back. It is a perfectly written film. It's essentially improv between two construction workers who are in a pit basically, and once again the animation is extremely expressive, and it has this kind of, I'm not going to reveal the ending because it's so powerful, and it's such a like deep statement, I would say, about so many things. But I think it wouldn't work without the way it's delivered, because the film is not, like, doesn't read as planned out. Most of the dialogue on their films overall, but especially this one, is improvised, and it's very kind of um, just based on the real world and feels very real. And so when you have an ending like what happens, it feels so real. It feels, you know, much, even though they're drawings and not, real people, it feels way more like accurate to the real world than most live action films, because it's so grounded in the way the characters talk and the way they're drawn. It's so expressive. It's drawn again in this very experimental, rich style that I just think it looks amazing on this one. I don't honestly know between my top two which I think has better animation. It's so close. They both have such an amazing richness to them um, in the way they have these kind of abstract lines and things fade into each other, and it's such a gorgeous cartoon. Like, it is, like, these are, I think, I think animated shorts overall are so underappreciated. They're some of the best examples of, animation craftsmanship you can find. I think it's, yeah, I just, I think their stuff is amazing. There's a lot of them like that. There's a lot of, not on this list that, you know, that I didn't have the option to, that's amazing as well. So those are my top 10. If you were inspired to check out any of these, that's great. And yeah, thank you for watching. And yeah, thanks. Peace out.